Okay, thank you. Tonight, we have a Board of Appeals hearing for a request for conditional use. This is September 7th, 2023. This is case number 536. At this time, anyone wishing to speak at this meeting, please stand for the oath. Raise your right hand. Do you hereby solemnly declare or affirm under penalties of perjury that the responses given as statements made will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Yes. Thank you. You can be seated. The codified zoning ordinance of the Mayor and City Council of Havre specify procedures governing the operation of the Board of Appeals of the city. Section 3 dictates administrative requirements be met prior to the hearing. This includes advertising, posting the property, and notification of applicable property owners. Have these requirements been met?
They have.
Thank you. Have you received any responses from interested parties?
We have not.
Okay, thank you. The ordinances governing the operation of the Board of Appeals of the city is a matter of public record and is available at City Hall should anyone wish to review it. The applicant tonight, again, is requesting a conditional use. At this point, we will start to take testimony. We will start with the Department of Planning.
Good evening, everyone.
Please state your name and address.
Sure. Tim Borsier, Director of Planning, 711 Pennington Avenue. We have today a request for conditional use approval for multifamily dwellings at the Mount Felix property located at 2000 Level Road. City code requires that anything that would have to go under site plan or subdivision approval, that also requires a Board of Appeals review, receive Board of Appeals review first. So that's why we're here this evening. So you did receive a concept plan and some other information, but today we're not in any way endorsing any sort of plan or any development. This will still have to go through the Planning Commission development process. We're only looking at, based on Chapter 25, Section 17B, the conditional use items, those 10 findings that we have, whether multifamily dwellings would be appropriate for this area, that would be an appropriate use for this area, any conditions that may be required to make it appropriate. And then again, once that happens, the entire Planning Commission process will still go forward. I think just the reason for that, just in case anybody's wondering, is if for some reason this group felt that multifamily dwellings weren't allowed, they went through the entire Planning Commission process, had everything designed, everything ready to go, and then that use wasn't allowed by this group, they'd have to go back through the process and redesign everything. So we always start with this first, and that's what's required under city code, and I assume it's because of that reason. So again, under Section 205-27, for the RB district, multifamily dwellings are allowed with conditional use approval by the Board of Appeals. The property is located south of Level Road, adjacent to the recently approved Scion Hill Estates development at the Mount Felix Winery and the surrounding property. It's currently being used as the winery and agricultural purposes, but was slated for residential development when it was annexed into the city under Annexation Resolution 277. Again, it's RB. They're proposing a mix of condominiums and townhouses. Again, that's just as part of the concept plan that you have. This needs to go through an entire process. So at this time, the condominiums would be the consideration for multifamily dwellings. Just as a little background, this was annexed in under Annexation Resolution 277. There were some parameters they had to meet as part of the annexation resolution. The main one was that there'd be a single concept plan that all the owners had sort of bought into, and that was ratified under Resolution 22016. So none of the conditions that may be put on this, may be placed on it by all of you today, can conflict with the annexation resolution or the single concept plan. During discussions, if something like that comes up and I see that there's a conflict, I'll let you know. There's also representatives in the audience of the various landowners, and I'm sure that they'll be more than happy to chime in. Again, the development process, it's required to still go through the Planning Commission process. So really, we are looking at today those 10 items that we look at for special exceptions and conditional uses. So I'll just go through those briefly. Number one is this permissible special exception within the zone, and has the petition complies with all procedural requirements? It has met all the procedural requirements. Complies with all standards and requirements specifically set forth for such use as may be contained in this chapter. So far it has. Again, it has to go under Planning Commission approval. If it doesn't, then the Planning Commission wouldn't be able to approve of it. There are potential issues in the area with traffic and water that would affect Chapter 2, the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. When the final plans are submitted for preliminary site plan and subdivision approval, we would review the adequate public facilities issue at that time. Will it be detrimental to the use, peaceful enjoyment, economic value, or development of surrounding properties or the general neighborhood, and will cause no objectionable noise, vibration, fumes, odors, dust, toxicity, glare, or physical activity? Cyan Hill Estates is currently being developed next door, so there's trucks moving dirt and stuff around. There's just development going on in this area, so any continued development shouldn't be an issue, and it is consistent it's consistent so far with the annexation resolution and the single concept plan resolution. Will be in harmony with the general character of the neighborhood, considering population density, design, and bulk of any proposed new structure or conversion of existing structures, as well as the intensity and character of activity, traffic, parking conditions, and a number of similar uses. Again, they'll have to submit traffic impact statements. They'll have to provide site plans. They'll have to provide architecture as all part of that process. The Planning Commission will make that decision. As of now, the concept plan does fit as far as these proceedings are concerned. Will it be consistent with the comprehensive plan or other planning guides or capital programs for the physical development of the district? The currently adopted comprehensive plan improperly had the Mount Felix property as part of the Maryland Environmental Trust easement that's next to it. So the 2010 comprehensive plan didn't really address this property at all. But since then, we had the 2014 annexation and the 2020 single concept plan. And in the current draft of the comprehensive plan, we have this shown as medium density residential. And this would fit in with that definition of medium density residential. Will not adversely affect the health, safety, security, morals, or general welfare of residents, visitors, or workers in the area. We don't see any reason why it would do that. Will be served by adequate public facilities, including police and fire protection, water and sanitary sewer, storm drainage, public roads, and other improvements. Again, we have the adequate public facilities under ordinance under Chapter 2 that looks at water, sewer, road, and schools, and they'll have to meet those requirements before they can even see the Planning Commission. So we'll make sure that all those requirements are met before going forward. We'll consider the environmental impact and sensitive features and opportunities. So as part of this, they'll have to do a forest conservation plan and landscape plan that'll indicate where any wetlands or other sensitive features are, steep slopes, that sort of thing. And then we'll be able to decide the issues that come up once that's done. So it will consider the impact of those once we receive that additional information. We'll consider the preservation of cultural and historic landmarks. The Department of Planning staff report for the single concept plan in 2020 had recommended at that time that architectural elements of historic properties at the Mount Felix Winery be incorporated into any new development on that site. We'll provide that to the Planning Commission when we go forward at the time when they're able to submit for preliminary plan review. And petitioners demonstrated a need for use. I think all trends, national, regional, and local, show that there's a need for additional housing. So the Planning Department recommends approval of the conditional use request for multifamily dwellings at 2000 Level Road. Since the applicant will need to meet the city's adequate public facilities ordinance and receive approval from the Planning Commission on other city development requirements, we're not recommending any other conditions be added at this time. Again, this is only for examining the appropriateness of multifamily dwellings at this location and not for approval of any development. The Department of Planning believes that the applicant's request meets the findings requirements under Chapter 2517B. Further Planning Commission and staff review of the actual development will be subsequently required. I'll take any questions if you have them.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Tim? No? Okay, thank you. Next, we'll hear from the applicant or the applicant's representative.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Bradley R. Stover. My address is 124 North Main Street. That's Bel Air, Maryland, 21014. Here this evening on behalf of the contract purchaser of the subject property, Mr. Dave Sobzak, who's here and has been sworn in under oath. This property is located at 2000 Level Road, and it's owned by Peter and Mary Ianello. And I'd like to parrot a little bit of what Mr. Boissier said, try not to be too repetitive, but the applicant certainly acknowledged that we're here for a very limited purpose tonight, the conditional use request for multifamily dwellings. The applicant acknowledges that BPFO, other issues will all have to be satisfied, and the plan will have to be vetted through the Planning Commission approval process. We recognize that we're here for a very limited purpose, and that is the conditional use approval. So with that, I'd like to call my first witness, Mr. Tom Miner from Frederick Ward Associates, who I believe is, you got sworn in under oath? Yes. Okay, good.
We're being recorded.
All right, on YouTube.
Now, is Mr. Miner hidden from you now? Is that?
Very.
It's all right, the plan looks better than me anyway.
Okay.
Would it be better to put the plan to this side so you can see
It
Mr.
probably-
Miner?
Probably
or-
would be, yeah, in case we have questions, yeah. Literally blindside him there.
Just want to make sure you know who's actually testifying.
They don't want to see me anyway, so this works.
I could probably stand behind it, too. Mr. Miner, just for the record, could you state your name and business address, please?
Sure, Tom Miner, Frederick Ward Associates, 5 South Main Street, Bel Air.
And what is your professional background, sir?
Civil engineer?
And have you been qualified as an expert civil engineer before in front of Board of Appeals located in Harford County?
Yes.
And what is your educational background?
University of Delaware for 4 years and practicing for 17 years.
And are you a professional engineer?
Yes.
Okay. And specific to this application tonight, have you made yourself, or were you already familiar with the provisions of the City of Havre de Grace's zoning code?
Yes.
I'm going to, well, let me do this. Mr. Miner, I'm going to show you what I will offer as the applicant's exhibit number 1. Is that a true and accurate copy of your resume?
Yes.
Chair, with your leave, I will hand out what I'm offering as exhibit number 1.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, for purposes of tonight's hearing, I'm going to be offering Mr. Miner as an expert professional engineer who, as he just testified, has knowledge regarding the City of Havre de Grace's zoning code and subdivision plan approval process.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Miner, are you familiar with the property that is the subject of tonight's hearing?
Yes.
And did Frederick Ward, in fact, prepare the site plan we've got mounted opposite to you now for the purpose of tonight's hearing?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, members, I have additional copies of that site plan. I don't know if you all have one.
We do have
We
them.
do, okay,
Yes,
all right, so
thank
I
you.
won't give you more paper then. For purposes of the record, I'll be offering then the site plan that's before you and the larger copy that's mounted as the applicant's exhibit number 2. Mr. Miner, perhaps I could get you to go walk over to the site plan. I have a few questions for you.
I probably have most of them memorized.
Okay,
So-
all right. If you don't, or if there's a question where you need to refer to the board.
Sure.
Mr. Miner, what is the acreage, total acreage of the property?
So the total acreage of the entire 14.68.
And how is the property zoned under the city's zoning code?
The property is zoned as RB, residential business.
And what is the applicant's proposed use for this property?
The proposed use that we're discussing today is for residential. Ooh.
And specifically, part of that residential component, does that include multifamily dwellings?
Correct. So we're proposing a multifamily component with condos and then also townhomes.
And just illustrate on the plan for the board where specifically the condominiums are proposed to be located.
Sure, the condominiums are located to the west of the property, while the towns are located to the east.
And can you highlight on the site plan the proposed access points to the proposed development?
Sure, the access point is accessing off Scion Hill Drive, which is currently under construction as part of the Scion Hill Estates project, and then that access is off Bully Rock Parkway.
And can you highlight proposed parking areas for this use?
Parking surrounds most of buildings 1, 2, and 3 of the condos, and then also there's ancillary parking around the rest of the site between townhomes at the end of the cul-de-sac, and then also parking is provided on lot for the townhomes as well as 2-car garages, and then also 2 cars available on lot.
And assuming the applicant's able to satisfy APFO, would the property be proposed to be served by public water and sewer?
Yes.
Will the applicant be required to also provide for adequate stormwater management in conjunction with the development?
Yes.
And can you describe the surrounding, you talked about the access points, but can you describe the surrounding road network?
Sure, the surrounding road network is primarily new roads systems that were installed in the past 20 or so years. Bully Rock Parkway being the primary loop road connecting in with Level Road.
Talk to us about the nature of the surrounding properties, how they're used and developed.
So, as Tim mentioned earlier, the surrounding properties are being developed under a previous agreement with mostly either singles, towns, or the winery business. Currently, it's set up, either the winery is on the current lot, or vineyard too, along with the farm that is next door, which is, I guess, in for development plan approval currently.
And do you concur with what Mr. Boursier testified about a few minutes ago, that this property was annexed into the city sometime in the mid part of the last decade?
Yes.
And is, in fact, as Mr. Boursier stated, subject to a concept plan related to that annexation?
Yes.
Specific to the proposed condominium uses, how many total individual units?
There's a total of 146 units, 50 being townhomes and 96 being condos.
And what is the...
Say that again? How many in the condominium?
50 towns and 96 condos for 146.
Okay.
With respect to the condominium buildings, what's the proposed height?
The proposed height, they're going to be 4 stories.
As designed and proposed, does the use otherwise meet the provisions or requirements of the City of Havre de Grace's code?
Yes, we believe so.
Specific to the factors that this board must consider under the code, well, strike that. You would agree that this use does in fact require conditional approval by this board under 205-27E?
Yes, for the condominium usage.
All right, well, let's then talk about the factors the board has to consider under 25-16B. Mr. Minor, in your opinion, will the proposed use have an adverse impact on the people residing or working in the immediate area?
No.
And do other residential uses in fact surround this proposed area?
They will be per the plan and per construction that's occurring right now.
It's proposed that in the future, it will be surrounded by other residential uses?
Correct.
And that would include the Scion Hill development?
Correct.
Mr. Minor, in your opinion, will the proposed multifamily use have any detrimental impact on the orderly growth of the city of Havre de Grace?
No.
And do you believe, in fact, that this proposed development is consistent with the annexation plan and concept plan you just testified to a minute ago?
Yes.
Okay. The applicant will be required to meet all off-street parking requirements under the code, is that right?
Correct.
And again, that will be the subject of a planning commission review, is that right?
Correct.
To your knowledge, will a traffic study be required?
Yes.
And is a traffic study currently in the process of being pursued?
Correct. It is being performed currently.
Okay. Will sidewalks be required?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a requirement of the city code as well as, to your understanding, a requirement of what the contract purchaser wants?
Correct.
Will, in your opinion, Mr. Minor, the proposed multifamily use have any adverse impact on the ability of nearby property owners to peacefully enjoy their homes?
No, won't have an adverse effect.
Has the applicant prepared or received architectural renderings for the proposed buildings?
Yes.
Hand you what will be the applicant's exhibit number 3. Is that a true and accurate copy of the proposed renderings that you have received and reviewed?
This is, yes.
Chair, members of the board, this will be the applicant's.
Thanks, sir.
The architectural rendering that has now been offered as exhibit number 3, Mr. Minor, do you believe that is consistent with the character of the proposed developments in the nearby area?
Yes.
And just for purposes of the record, that exhibit number 3 shows a schematic of what the buildings will look like from the outside as well as floor plans, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Sobzak is here and able to testify if there are questions specific to that design.
Thank you.
Mr. Minor, because these are residential uses, would you concur that there will be no adverse impact as a result of any dust, gas, smoke, fumes, vibrations, glare, or noise?
Correct.
In your opinion, Mr. Minor, is residential the most appropriate use for this property?
Yes.
And why is that?
It coordinates and connects in with the rest of the residential uses that are surrounding the parcel.
Are you aware of any court cases that might impact this property?
No, not negatively.
Are, in your opinion, Mr. Minor, are the purposes of the RB zoning regulations as set forth in the code met by this proposed use?
Yes.
And in your opinion, in fact, Mr. Minor, do you believe that residential is, in fact, the most appropriate use in an RB district, particularly here?
Correct. Yes.
Are you aware of any nearby schools, churches, or other institutional uses that would be impacted negatively by this proposal?
No.
And as you testified to earlier, will the properties be served by public water and sewer, assuming APFO is satisfied?
Yes.
Are the properties intended to be served by trash and garbage collection as required under the city code?
Yes.
Will the proposed construction be required to comply with all applicable building codes for residential construction?
Yes.
Are you aware of any environmental contaminations on the property?
No.
In your opinion, Mr. Minor, is there a need for this type of housing in the city of Havre?
Yes.
Are there any cultural or historic landmarks on or close to this property?
The, I guess, Mount Felix Estate Home is not, while not classified as historic, it's classified as one to be preserved, so. But that's not within the parcel that which we are developing.
And how would the applicant propose in this case to mitigate any potential impacts on Mount Felix?
So we've kept a buffer away from the house itself, a little over 300 feet from structure, from the townhome structures or condo structures to the house.
And what would that buffer consist of?
The buffer primarily consists of just green open space, and then the cul-de-sac is composed of some of it, but primarily just grass open space for viewership of the winery and vineyard.
Mr. Minor, in your opinion, does this proposal provide for adequate separation from other nearby uses?
Yes.
In fact, consistent with what you just testified about regarding the buffer, is that right?
Correct.
Mr. Minor, in your opinion, will the proposed use have a negative impact on the population of the city of Havre de Grace?
No.
Mr. Minor, are adequate public facilities, understanding that this needs to be resolved and addressed at Planning Commission, but it's part of the statute, are adequate public facilities available to serve the project?
Currently, there's a study being performed to determine what is required. From my knowledge, we still have a sufficient amount of water and sewer to service this property individually.
Is it true, sir, that approvals and work cannot begin without APFO being met and the services provided?
That's what's been indicated to us. Correct.
In your opinion, Mr. Minor, will the proposed use have any negative impact on the city's transportation systems?
No, and any requirements will be met through the traffic study to make sure the intersections are meeting required.
Okay, that was my next question. And the traffic impact study is something that would have to be considered and requirements met as part of the Planning Commission approval, is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Minor, in your opinion, is the proposed use compatible with nearby development?
Yes.
In your opinion, is the proposed use consistent with the city's comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Will the applicant be required to submit stormwater management plans for approval if it moves forward to the preliminary Planning Commission process?
Yes.
And will the applicant be required to submit grading and sediment and erosion control plans for approval if it moves forward to the Planning Commission process?
Yes.
And you just testified a traffic study will be required?
Correct.
And to reiterate, APFO will have to be met as part of that Planning Commission process.
Yes.
Is it true that simply granting this conditional use approval tonight doesn't grant any broad brush approvals? The limited purpose for tonight is simply whether or not the conditional use requirements for the multifamily homes are being met?
Yes.
In your opinion, generally, Mr. Minor, will this use have an adverse impact above and beyond that which would have at any other location in the RB district in the city of Havre de Grace?
No.
Mr. Minor, have you had opportunity to review the staff report Mr. Bossier testified about a few minutes ago?
Yes.
Do you concur with its findings?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I have no further questions for Mr. Minor.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
When you say that you're doing the traffic study, is that just for the entrance and egress from the development, or is also coming into town and going to 95? Because there's very limited access on Level as well as Chapel Road coming down to the city.
So the traffic study that's being performed will, when we're performing the traffic study, before we even do the counts, do the study, we sit down with the town, with SHA, and the county, depending on which roads would be impacted. And it's called a scoping meeting. And during that scoping meeting, we determine which intersections need to be studied to confirm that they meet the required level of service.
Well, my problem is neither one of those roads can handle too much more traffic at certain parts of the day. It's overloaded. If you try to go up and down any time from like 9 on to 10, and then in the evening when people are leaving and going home, traffic is backed up the wazoo.
So during the traffic study, if there's a deficiency of an intersection, then there'll be a requirement to bring that intersection up to standard.
Have you also found out about the impact of the local elementary school? I think the high school, middle school have enough capacity, but how many children would be living there that would impact the elementary school?
So that would come down to the school study. That's going to be looked into during Planning Commission.
Okay.
For school capacity, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to school capacity currently. Typically, condos have a much lower utilization of children at them. So, that versus a townhome and or a single family use, you're going to typically, historically, just see less. As far as how the school district counts condos, I think and I could be wrong here, but I think they count them just across the board as the same. A unit is a unit. So, but typically you see much less family.
It also means getting a bus to do this route and pick up kids and take them to the schools too, so there's a big impact there.
Correct. Now, the school system does not go into private roads, so they would be utilizing the cul-de-sac and going on here. They wouldn't be entering the condo association.
Yeah, but they're going to be using the access points and egress points to be able to get in and out of there. That's my thing, is more traffic, more kids, and, okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. One, I'm not sure if you know this, but with the plans for the rest of the development surrounding that piece of property right now, are there any other buildings as tall as that?
The The four-story structure, I don't know if there's more, if there's other 4 stories. There are other towns, I guess, from what I've seen.
Yeah, I'm speaking primarily to the condo buildings, because everything else around there, I believe, is either a single-family home or a townhome. And it just seems like there's going to be a couple of really large buildings kind of dropped in the middle of all that. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I was just curious whether there were any plans to put anything else like that out there, or was this a unique situation?
I don't know what other types of towns they're going to have. Now, you can have 4-story towns, so I don't know if that what they're planning to do for the other townhomes adjacent to this project.
Sure.
Now, I would say for this grading for this site, the townhomes here, they're kind of at grade, but then as they come up to here, they're kind of dug in a little bit, so they're not going to be like sitting up on a knoll or being as prominent.
I wasn't really concerned about the townhomes, because the townhomes are going to have the same elevation frontage as everything else. The condos are going to be a unique animal unto themselves.
Right, but I'm saying for the condos, the grades, they were kind of digging it into the hillside section.
Okay,
I mean, it's not subterranean
I know what you mean.
structure, but they're not going to be as
To keep
prominent.
them level.
Correct.
Right, okay. And the only other question I had, you touched upon whether the water and sewage infrastructure was capable of handling it, particularly the water. And you answered it that, yes, for this development. Are you not factoring in the 800 and some odd other homes that are being built all around that when you said that?
So
If you were built first, it would cover you, but once the rest of them are in, it would not.
at some point between this development and this development, improvements will need to be made, but also improvements need to be made currently independent, actually, of either one of these developments. So it's kind of the caveat was to say that there is capacity in the system currently, but there's also, I know DPW is doing a study right now that's going to be working through their way in the next month or two. They should have answers as to how they want to have improvements, additional pressure, additional sewer capacity, all of that is getting worked out. Same with the traffic aspects of that. So this being, Board of Appeals is the first step, because we can't even go to the Planning Commission and get a lot of this stuff worked out until we know what type of utilization density, because obviously this is a different density and different utilization than we may see otherwise.
Okay, that's all I had, thank you.
Tim, more a question to you. Isn't there more than one historic building on the site?
There's the Scion Hill property, but that's not on the Mount Felix property. That's a little bit over, and then Mount Felix. I'm not sure if there's any specific historic designation, like if it's a landmark or something like that at the state or national level. Currently, the city doesn't have any local landmarks.
Is it the old admiral's dwelling, or whatever it was previously?
I think that's Scion Hill.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's not on the Mount Felix property. That wouldn't be affected by this development.
Okay.
The development wouldn't occur on the property where that house sits.
Okay.
So the access to Bully Rock Parkway, is that one cut in to this site, or is there multiple? Well, just how will that work off of?
From leaving the access to this site, you can either take left or right. If you take a right, you immediately pretty much go to Bully Rock Parkway. If you take a left, then you would go through a series of roads to get to the parkway eventually. Typically, you just would take a right to get onto.
Right, but there would be two accesses. Okay, yeah, and the existing lane into the vineyard that will still just remain for the vineyard there, correct? So that won't be additional burden on that road there. Okay, all right, thank you.
The only other thing I guess to add that hasn't really been brought up is the adjacent property, I think, is proposing a lot of townhomes. The condo option here does provide just a diversity of product, so that we're having some aspects when we have a lot of singles here. We're providing some towns but then we're having just a different diversity of products, so we're not, having all one type of material that's
Right.
brought on for housing.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
We haven't worked that. There's definitely going to be two separate something or another's, because a condo is very different than a townhome community. Now, whether it's separate underneath of it and then has a master association above it, that's an excellent question that is going to get worked out as we go through the process.
Yeah, Mr. Powell, I tend to think it'll be an umbrella.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Who else would like to speak this evening?
Does the board have any specific questions about the applicant's exhibit number 3 in design?
Yeah, I don't think so. No, thank you.
That would be the only witness I would call then.
Okay. Who else would like to speak? Please come forward to the podium. State your name and address, please.
My name is George Johnson. My address is 101 Bill Hart Road, Noonan, that's N-E-W-N-A-N, Georgia, 30313. I'm the single owner, single member of the LLC that owns the historic home Zion Hill. We bought it from the Greens 3 years ago, and we objected really to the original single concept plan. We amended it to come up with an agreement where roads weren't coming through the part of property we bought. It's 23 acres. It has two houses on it. One should be designated a historic home, but it's just it was the guest house for the big house, which is almost as big as anybody else's house in Havre de Grace. But Zion Hill is over 8,000 square feet, and it's a designated National Historic Landmark, not a historic place or home, making it one of 2,500 properties in America that has that designation. Oh, I'm a little nervous, sorry. I'm a lawyer and I haven't really done any litigation in a long time. But anyway, we bought it with the understanding with the Greens that we would protect the property, keep it up to standard, get it up to speed. We spent 3 years pretty much just working on the inside of the house, but we're doing the gardens too. Mrs. Green, Jonathan's mother, had the foresight to donate the large field that sits in front of our house on Level Road to the Maryland Land Trust, so it could never be developed because we have a clear view into the Susquehanna and the Chesapeake. You can see the split right there. So it's just really, the only entrance to Mount Felix right now is on it's on a right-of-way. It's a deeded right-of-way, but we own the right-of-way. They have the right to use it. So that issue's not been, I guess I just got a copy of the petition today. I got a certified letter last week, and this just kind of came out of the side. I mean, I talk with Jonathan and Don Sample fairly often. I sort of know what's going on, so I hadn't heard anything about this. We have a question about the ingress and the egress, and I don't know that there's any way for them to get in there now. And we're probably, if they're going to try to buy right away off of us or something, that has to go into discussion. But I know today we're here just to talk about density, and from what I can tell, well, the townhomes, single family homes are all around there. That's what's going on, what we sort of envisioned happening. But now they're talking about, we've not seen the plans for the buildings at all. That's the first time I think they've ever been brought out. But four-story condominium complex is not in keeping with the historic nature of our property or the historic nature of Mount Felix. Mount Felix was once a part of Zion Hill, but it was cut off and deeded to a relative or something. One of the relatives inherited it or something like that. There's the water and sewer issue. I mean, we're on well water. We don't use city water or sewage, and so that's, I know there's an issue with getting the water up to the development and all that. So I just don't see that the way the water and sewage is right now, that it can support the density for the condominiums. We have concerns with the condominiums, and I don't know enough about your codes, or, this is just sort of my first glance at this. But we don't want rental apartments down there. We don't want, it is, right now, it's bucolic, and we have this beautiful view. And I don't think it's really gonna affect our view, but just the very fact that this large development ends up in the middle of this otherwise kind of normal neighborhood is, I just think we have to think this whole through. We went along with the same, we talked about single concept plan. So we too might want to subdivide off something like 10 to 15 of our acres too. We just haven't got to that point. We've just sort of been talking with Jonathan and Don about, maybe we should do this. And so there's just a question. I just don't think at this point that the situation can be approved for the density on the condominiums. The townhomes, I think, are fine. I think there's parking issues and traffic issues, and I think that's about all I have to say. But I'll answer any questions.
Okay, well, to start with, I know your property there, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and I'm glad that you want to preserve it. It's a great piece of our local history. So I think that's great. And our request tonight is really very limited to the overall development concept here. So there, and I don't know if you've been talking to Tim in the city, who can probably shed some a lot more information with you as the process proceeds. But does anyone have questions for him? No? No?
All right.
But yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming and voicing your concerns.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Is there anyone else that would like to speak tonight?
If I could, Mr. Chair, I think the witness just raised some excellent points. Perhaps I could have Mr. Minor answer one or two questions.
That'd be
maybe
great.
clarify some of his
Yep.
testimony. Yeah, and we certainly would welcome Mr. Johnson during the planning commission process as well.
Great.
Mr. Minor, does any part of this property lie within any Maryland Environmental Trust easement?
No.
To your knowledge, will any additional private right-of-ways need to be purchased in order to access this property?
No.
And again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, at the planning commission process, things such as water, sewer, APFO for school capacity, traffic will be addressed. Is that right?
Correct. We have to address all of those before the project will be approved.
Okay. I just want to clarify that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. If no one else would like to speak, we're going to recess. The time is 7:15, and we will have a discussion and make a recommendation. time is 7:20, and the meeting is back in order. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to accept the conditional use of the Mount Felix property.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of accepting the motion? Aye. So moved. So we've approved your conditional use. The meeting's adjourned.